So let's get started. Come lay down on your back. So as you're settling there, what do you notice about yourself? It could be that there's aspects of your daily activities or other habits that you have in your thinking that are already silently bubbling to the surface. And so keep in mind that whether we're doing a very slow, simple lesson like today or a more complicated, dynamic lesson, the primary aim is for you to learn about yourself, learn about your habitual thinking, learn about how you see yourself. And hopefully, also, if you stay with this as a practice, you start to learn all kinds of lovely, interesting things about yourself too. Sometimes you got to get through the crap at first, but you might learn some very special, intimate details about yourself. So in that way, make sure that you don't attach too much to the instructions in this lesson or in any lesson. Because the instructions are intended to be a guide, but definitely not a rule. So in this lesson, you're going to have an opportunity to bring your attention to your breathing and to notice, hopefully notice something about your habits around breathing. And hopefully you will also discover a few possibilities. But I invite you to start by considering, just as you're laying there, the way that you experience your own vitality. Where is it? How do you recognize it? And now bring your attention to the way that the floor feels behind you. And notice if there's any kind of difference in the feeling of the floor behind your right leg, from your heel to your bum, versus your left leg. Is that an easy difference to feel for you? What about the way the floor feels behind your two arms, your right arm, your left arm, from your hand to your shoulder? What kind of differences can you feel there? And then what about along your back? Is there any difference in the way that you feel your upper back or your middle back or your lower back? Where is the sensation the clearest? And then notice the way the floor feels behind your head. And do a soft, gentle movement of turning your head a little bit left and right so that you can feel that subtle change. And how small does the movement have to be so that you can get a sense of balance in how it feels turning right or left? Or is there always one side that somehow feels easier, clearer? Does anything else change when you turn your head like this? How are you breathing? Are you used to your breathing feeling a particular way, or Is the feeling of your breathing a bit abstract? And then leave your head comfortably in the middle. And observe how your air comes in through your nose. And where does it go next? Can you follow the sensation of your breathing, or at some point do you kind of lose it, lose the feeling? Now, can you tell if there's a difference in the feeling, the sensation of your inhale or your exhale? Do you have a preference? And then keep your attention on your inhale for a while. Maybe slow it down if it's helpful. But listen for a sense of interaction throughout yourself with your inhale. And let your exhale be passive. And notice the kind of effort in your inhalation. And then pause with that for a moment. Breathe comfortably, as shallow as feels natural. And then come back and pay attention to the exhale and have your inhale more or less passive and follow your exhale. Where does it go? What's it feel like? Is it a different kind of effort than when you breathe in? And then leave that and again, rest a moment, rest your attention. And of course, as with all breathing lessons, it's very easy to drift off. So come back when you feel fresh and able to pay attention. And otherwise, maybe you let yourself take a little rest. So roll over onto your left side. Make sure you're comfortable. Have your head on a thin padding or on your arm or on the floor. And bend your two knees up in front of you until you can get a sense that you are supported on your side by the floor. And start with your right arm draped alongside yourself. Your right hand will be somewhere around your hip. And again, start with your attention on your inhale. And notice in this situation, when you are listening for the influence of your in-breath, what changes do you feel along the front of you? And try to have your exhale as passive as possible so your focus can be primarily on your inhale. Notice how the shape of the front of you changes. And notice if you can reduce the effort in other parts of yourself. Maybe it's your thighs or your knees or your ankles. Maybe it's more in your shoulders or your neck. And then as you're ready, shift your attention And see what your exhale feels like in the front of you. Is there any change? And then pause for a moment, rest your attention, and stand your right hand on the floor in front of you, in front of your chest. And figure out which way your fingers can be pointing that is the most comfortable for you. And you have the least amount of effort in your shoulder. Your arm could be resting on yourself. You don't want your arm to be activated at all. And of course, like with any Feldenkrais lesson, if anything that I suggest is uncomfortable, then you change it. And you find your version of what I'm asking for, even if it means that that part is something you just imagine. Now, bring your attention back to your exhale. And notice what you feel around your right shoulder blade when you breathe out. Notice the right side of your neck. And check that the way that your head is positioned isn't already somehow encumbering the freedom of your neck on the right side. And then see if as you breathe out, you can really gently, softly slide your shoulder blade down away from your head. And then return to neutral. So again, if your arm, your elbow can be resting on yourself, that's going to be a situation that will probably require less effort of your shoulder. And if it feels at all painful or uncomfortable to lower your shoulder, keep investigating how you could change the position of your wrist and elbow. And the movement of your shoulder going down can be as tiny and gentle as possible. And as you continue with following your exhales like this, notice, are you using one of your nostrils more than the other one? Does your air seem to move more on the right or the left side of your chest? And when your shoulder goes down, does it also go forward and down or back and down? Can you choose? Or is there only one way for your shoulder to move at this point? Okay, and then just pause a moment. And now as you continue following your exhale and bringing your shoulder down, see what happens if you bring your shoulder down and you keep it down as you continue to breathe in and out. And again, keep looking for sneaky places of effort elsewhere. Your mouth, your jaw, your thighs, your abdomen. Can you move your shoulder while keeping your abdomen soft? So you just hold your shoulder down, take a few breaths, then you release it and you try again. And then leave your shoulder quiet and let your air be natural. And listen for any residue of movement in your shoulder without deliberately moving your shoulder. And then bring your attention to your right hip. And first, bring your right hand onto the side of your right hip again. And see if this time when you follow your exhalation, if you can hitch your right hip up a little bit in the direction of your shoulder. And take your time to figure out what is required to create that movement. And if you can start to feel how it's possible to bring your hip up a little bit towards your shoulder, towards your armpit, then from there you might start to determine where you can reduce the effort. So, what's it feel like bringing your hip up as you exhale? Is there somewhere that you might actually be fighting yourself, interfering with yourself, holding somewhere else that actually inhibits the possible freedom of the side of your pelvis? And now here's an interesting little brain game. See if when you breathe out, you can join the hip movement with the previous shoulder movement. So now your hip and your shoulder are essentially going closer to each other. Your right waist is getting shorter. And see if for you, using your shoulder helps you somehow to hitch your hip. And what kind of effect does bringing your shoulder and your hip closer together have on your exhale? Okay, and then take a little rest on your back and see what your contact with the floor feels like now. Notice if there's any slight change in the feeling of your exhalation or your inhalation. And notice if you see yourself differently on the right side of you or the left side of you. And then come onto that same side again, onto your left side. Bend up your knees again. Stand your right hand on the floor in front of your chest again. Pause for a moment, observe your comfortable natural breathing, and listen for any kind of response that you feel along the right side of you. Notice the way that you experience your breathing in the front of you. And see, is there anywhere that you feel your breathing in the back of you? Bring your attention to your inhalation and let your right shoulder blades slide up a little bit in the direction of your head. And as your shoulder comes back to neutral, let your exhale be as passive as possible. And listen for where you could reduce the effort in other parts of yourself that might not actually be supporting the movement of your shoulder. Does anything change in the way that you're resting on the left side of you when you breathe in and slide your shoulder up? Does this feel easier than breathing out and sliding the shoulder down like you were doing before? Okay, now just rest for a moment on your side. and see what it feels like to gently slide your shoulder up as you're breathing in, but then keep your shoulder up and continue breathing in and out. And just hold it for a few breaths and then let it go. Pause. And then when you're ready in your own time, try it again and see if you can start to clarify the difference in the feeling of breathing when your shoulder is elevated or not. And then pause with that for a moment. Put your right hand on the side of your hip again. Just remind yourself of the movement you'd just done with your hip before, hitching your hip up in the direction of your armpit. Let's try that movement a couple times. And then see what happens if you go in the opposite direction. And then when you're ready, see if you can join that movement of your hip with your inhale. So as you're breathing in, your hip is going to move down away from your waist. And then as you breathe out, come back to neutral. And if you can, try it with your right hand standing again in front of your chest. Or otherwise, leave your hand there if it helps you to find the movement potential of your hip. And then again, play with this idea of the way that you use your shoulder and your hip. And for you, is it somehow easier to organize a particular movement of your hip if you're also doing something with your shoulder? So see if as you're breathing in, you can move your hip and your shoulder away from each other. And let the space along the right side of you get longer. And then as you breathe out, come back to neutral. And see again if you can keep your abdomen soft, keep your jaw, your tongue soft. Don't try too hard. You just see what you can access easily, lightly, comfortably. Okay, and then take a little pause for a moment here on your side. And pay attention to what your natural, comfortable breathing is like. Now stand your right hand in front of your chest again on the floor in a comfortable way. And this time, when you're breathing in, let your shoulder and your hip move away from each other. And when you're breathing out, bring your shoulder and your hip slightly closer together. Listen for a sense of shape change along the side of you. And see what happens to the shape on the left side of you. What happens around the area of your left low back? Is there a change there when your right shoulder and hip are farther away or closer together? And then leave it and rest on your back. And what do you notice about yourself now? Is there any difference in the way that you see yourself from your heel to your hip, to your shoulder, to your head, on the right side and on the left side? And again, you could consider this idea of vitality. Is there any difference in your experience of vitality, the expression of vitality on the right or the left side of you? And then come over onto your right side. Bend your knees up in front of you, put your left hand on the floor in front of you. Make any adjustments you need to be comfortable on your right side. And notice what happens in your thinking as you switch sides and prepare for something on the second side. What happens with your attention? Now we could say you've learned, you've practiced, you've experienced yourself on one side in a particular way, and you're switching sides. So what of your learning process? What of your self-observation? And then without moving yet, just feel as you're laying here what sort of impression your breathing has on your left shoulder or your left hip. And on this side, start with your inhalation and see what it feels like to slide your left shoulder up in the direction of your head as you breathe in, and then to settle back to neutral as you breathe out. Is there a way that your shoulder can move that's less jerky? Maybe on this side, your shoulder comes more forward or is different somehow from the way that your other shoulder was moving. But what about just simply the relationship of inhalation and shoulder movement, a change in the diameter of your rib cage? Does that seem like it's something that's more accessible on this side or less accessible? And already having observed yourself holistically on the other side, notice when you're moving just your left shoulder, where does your attention travel? And then go ahead and join in with your hip as you breathe in. So as your shoulder moves toward your head, your hip moves away from your head. And then when you breathe out, you come back to neutral. Does your abdomen want to be involved with this movement in a bigger way than it needs to be? Maybe for you, it's more your groin or another part of you that you could soften a little bit more. So the movement's delicate, comfortable. Now, what about your right side? As you're exploring your shoulder and your hip moving away from each other, is that accommodated at all by something on your right side? Just rest a moment. And then see on this side what it's like to breathe out as you slide your shoulder and your hips slightly toward each other. And then let your inhalation be fairly neutral or passive as you return back to where you started. And feel the back of your nose and your throat. Notice if there's a difference in the feeling in the top of your chest or the bottom of your chest. And then rest a bit. Listen for any sort of influence on your resting breath. And notice the kind of shape change that is created from your inhale and from your exhale without creating anything intentionally. And then again, stand your left hand and start to explore what it feels like. Not a pump, it's not a pump, right? It's just a complement, a complementary movement of your shoulder and your hip with your respiration, so that when you breathe in, there's a certain sense of a lengthening along the left side of you, and see how that changes the right side of you. And then as you breathe out, there's a shortening on the left side of you. And how does that change the side that you're laying on? And is it possible the movement can be very slow and delicate, not at all strong or fast? You have a little bit more time to get more of a holistic sense of yourself. Have you already decided which position is better for you? Do you like it more when you breathe out and bring your shoulder and hip toward each other? Or do you like it more when you breathe in and have your shoulder and your hip away from each other? And then finally, here's another funny idea is, as you're lightly moving your hip and your shoulder with your inhale and your exhale, what happens to your chest? Can you get a sense of your breastbone from the base of your throat down to the archway of your ribs? And then the next time your shoulder and your hip are close together, just keep them close together and take several slow, gentle, natural breaths in and out. And then release when you're ready, pause for a couple moments, and then go ahead and try again. Bringing your shoulder and hip together, keeping them together, and feeling what respiration is like in that position. And then try it a few times the other way so that your shoulder and your hip move away from each other as you breathe in and you keep them away. And just pause in that position for a couple moments. Lengthened on your left side as you breathe in and out. And just try that a couple of times. And then let all of that go and just rest here on your side and, and pick up the rebound. Listen to the influence of this particular organization, this particular study. And then come and rest on your back. And again, see what the floor feels like behind you. Notice the areas that you feel a lightness in yourself, in your breathing. Notice what kinds of differences you discover on the right and the left side of you. Now, see if it's possible to keep your attention casually on the feeling and the movement of your breathing as you shift gears, as you roll over, as you sit up, as you walk around a bit, and reflect on the influence of this kind of work, and how you see yourself and how you breathe when you're moving around. I'm going to leave you to have your own experience and hope that you'll take at least 5 minutes on your own to to just be with your own thing, your own way. Integrate. And I hope to see you next week. Thanks for coming. Bye.